24. Man, it's overcast today in Crum America, Josh. I bet y'all have a few clouds in the sky, too, if I'm just assuming.
I'm going to tell you that my window here in my office faces east. And, yeah, I can't see a cloud in the sky.
No kidding.
Yeah.
How about that?
So,
be a good day to go to the beach.
Yeah, a little north wind still. Kind of cooled it down. Nothing like I saw at our faithful listener, Mark Johnson. Mark, I know you're listening there, that we do not have snow or ice or having to dig our sows out of the sow barn.
Holy smokes.
But we did get in the low 40s again last night. So Carrie just texted me about a sow somewhere coughing, so that's good. Yeah.
My normal response to that is she'll be all right.
Yeah.
One way or the other, she'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's one way to go about it. She probably will be.
Yeah, she'll be all right. I remember, that's a story I can tell. And I remember when I was a young lad growing up in East Texas, we dabbled a little bit in the old goat deal. This is before the redheads made it.
I've never heard this story.
No, you haven't. Well, that's just because I said she's going to be okay. And we had this mama goat get sick. And Dad took her to another barn that was across the road, and I didn't understand that, but maybe Dad knew more about goats than I did and give him credit for. But I'd go check on that goat morning and night, man, because she was the mom of my baby goats. And I couldn't have been 7, 8, 9, still had a tender heart towards these livestock creatures. And came home from school one day. I said, "Hey, Dad, how's the mama goat?" We had her name, but I don't remember her name. He goes, "She'll never have another worry in the world." And I was elated, man. I was like, "Oh, she's better. She's going to have more babies." And Dad quickly went and got a shovel, and we buried that stupid mama goat.
Never have another worry in the world, son.
So 38 years later, that's my attitude. She'll be okay.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to look at it.
On some of them. I mean, maybe the one coughing needs a little attention. Probably going to get it down there. And she would probably get it here, but she's going to be all right.
She's going to be all right. Yeah, it's all good in the head.
We might can roll that into Luke 6. I don't know. We can try.
Yeah.
See, Mark Johnson, you already got us off base because I'm sitting here in a hoodie and shorts, and I bet you I would have to have pants on at your house today.
I'm in a hoodie and pants, but if it's like yesterday, after lunch, I'll be back in shorts and rolling.
On another note, I've seen more trampolines where they're not supposed to be than I ever have, and we have a lot of
y'all had a little weather the other night. I heard.
Our trampoline is in the ground with rebar, but we can no longer jump on it. It looks like it's going to be a chicken coop before long. Just get a little net, chicken wire. Yeah, nothing to jump on. I thought that was odd. I wish it had just picked the whole thing up and taken it a mile in any direction. I don't care. It'd be gone.
Right.
I wouldn't have to worry about it. But
somebody else would have had a busted trampoline.
But the weather was wild.
Yeah, Ken told me the other day it was like 86 mile an hour winds through Richardson, maybe.
Yeah. Man, they showed a housing development going in, and it blew some houses over that were framed up and had the roof on. And they were on the ground. Real sad. Not good at all. Hay barn next to us, or about half a mile from where we are, is gone. It blew things around like it's never blown before. And we've had some pretty rough wind through here. So
right.
Very, very interesting.
But no actual tornadoes, just straight line winds.
I think they called an EF1 in Irving, which would be south, almost directly south, a little southeast of here, 40 miles.
Huh. Yeah.
30 miles. I don't know. It's all the same when you get past Lake Louisville, south of here. It's all Dallas.
Right.
If you ask my mom, I live in Dallas, and I don't. But that's what she says, going to Dallas.
Right. You're closer to Fort Worth than Dallas, huh?
I am.
Yeah.
I'm closer to a lot of places than Dallas.
Well, right. Used to, you referenced the big towns like Fort Worth, not the,
Yeah.
Crum, and what do y'all have? Y'all are 6A high school?
Crum is still 4A,
4A.
but it won't be long. There'll be 5. It's coming.
Yeah.
Bring it on. I got 12 acres that will have a for sale sign in the yard as soon as it needs to.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'll go.
Well, I mean, there's always room in Montgomery.
Y'all like that land a lot down there too.
Somebody likes it a lot. Yeah. When I bought this place, I wasn't liking it at all, but
Oh,
since then it is.
yeah. That's what I tell folks about our place. It's just a good Lord shining on an East Texas redneck. Because I was griping about this place, and my realtor said, "Shut up and write the check." And now I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Of course, that guy knew more about land than I did.
Right.
Kind of like my dad and that goat, just a little more wise.
It is. Land is never a bad investment.
Not at all.
Uh,
And for those of you that are curious on that goat, she raised the grand champion goat in 1994 at the Panola County Exposition and Livestock Show.
Now, see, I never knew where Rhett got his goat deal that he likes.
It's in his genes, baby.
Yeah.
That goat was so. Hey, Mock may call me after I tell all these stories about these goats, because in our younger days we had it going on. We won the county fair with a black, white-eared Nubian goat. Market show gets you, Kevin. We won it 1 year with the La Mancha, and those things don't have ears, and that goat was solid white. I don't remember what else, but this is way before the redheads got to America. Like on the cutting edge of goat showing in Texas.
We might have to get somebody on here that knows more about the history of this.
Yeah.
Wonder if Kevin would be. If he didn't know, he'd make it up.
Now, look, we're in East Texas, so those redheads may have been here for 10 years.
Oh, well.
Showing up in East Texas yet.
There's something about east of I-45 that's just a bit different, I'll say, and I live close enough to it.
And I resemble all that remark, guys. I'm not. Yeah, that's me. I just happen to live west of 35 now.
Is that West Texas? When you're west of 35?
Depends on who you ask. Yes, my kids' grandparents. We live in West Texas. I thought we lived in North Texas.
Yeah, that's what I call that part, which, I mean, for those that don't know, I grew up just an hour and a half north of where Reed is. I think that's how far it is. It's probably 3 hours now with the traffic. But, I always consider that North Texas.
Yes. Well, it's University of North Texas. We don't have the University of West Texas here. That's west of here.
Right. No, West Texas A&M is
West Texas,
yes, in the Panhandle. Some might say. So,
of course,
West Texas is San Angelo, and
yes,
and down in there, and then the armpit of, not the armpit of Texas, but you've got the, what do they call it around El Paso besides Mexico?
Mexico. Oh, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. See, I always call where I live now. I'm sure all of you listeners tuned in for a geography lesson today, so I'm glad we're talking about this. But I always call this South Texas, because I mean it's not too far south, and you can be at the ocean. But I guess South Texas is really
east of
really deer hunting country in Mexico. It's really South Texas, like south of San Antonio is South Texas.
Yes, agreed.
So I don't know where I live. Central Texas,
Houston.
They would call Waco.
You live in Houston.
Right, pretty much, yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I live in the Piney Woods.
Let's say that.
Yeah, the Piney Woods. Anyways, if you were wondering about Texas and geography, for those of you that live out of the state, you're welcome. And if you weren't, we'll move on to things that are more important now. But I would like to know what this region is actually called. I guess maybe it is the Piney Woods. Maybe that's the...
I bet you're right. Quick Google search will tell you.
What did you find out?
Oh, prairies and lakes or the Gulf Coast. The Piney Woods is just north and east of y'all. That was my first search, though.
Yeah, I could sum it up. We don't have to have the internet for this. We live in the rainforest most of the time, is what I would consider it of Texas. It's humid, and it rains some more, and then it rains on the rain. And I'm not complaining about any of this. I'm just being descriptive. That if you don't like humidity or water, you don't need to live in Montgomery.
No.
So, anyways, back to our.
And that was my educated guess that you had clouds in the sky today.
No, that would be a good guess. This is, and like I say, I'm I got a standard 3x5 window here, so I mean I'm limited on my view, but it looks sunny outside. Here we are, 15 minutes in, and we've covered the weather, Texas geography,
goat history, and health.
Goat history. I forget about the goat history.
What else do we need?
I think that'd probably be enough for today. I appreciate y'all listening. We know that's what you tuned in for, and yeah, great.
Yeah. Well, we probably need to jump into Luke 6.
Luke 6.
Chapter 12.
It'll be verse 12, I think.
Yeah, Luke 6, verse 12. Luke chapter 6, verse 12. See, man, I'm thinking of the old days and that poor old mama goat. Verse 12. Man, and this is good stuff. Jesus is going to start calling his guys. Man, we can relate so much to God's calling on our life, like Jesus called those men, those young men in there. So verse 12 says, during those days, he went out to the mountain to pray and spent all night in prayer to God. Anybody ever done that? Josh ever done that? All night in prayer?
I can't say that I have.
He spent all night, and he knew what was coming. He knew that he was going to have to find some guys to go with him, some guys to follow him, some guys to learn and to be the original disciples. So, because Jesus knew his time on earth was soon to be done, and he needed his ministry to continue. And man, I just think about that. I'm like, man, if I pray much at night, like if I'm in the bed and I go to and I pray, I'm probably going to fall asleep, just like who was it? The disciples fell asleep in the garden the night of Jesus' arrest. And Jesus prayed all night. He was proactive in his prayer. And a lot of times I think I end up being more reactionary type prayer, if that makes any sense, Josh.
Right.
And when I just read that, I'm like, man, if I would just spend more time in prayer and more time and maybe it says he prayed all night, but he was abiding with the Father, and he was with the Father all night long. And if we could sit there and bring in prayer, I guess it doesn't have to be all night, but man, all day, while you are awake, all day, abiding in God's love and grace and mercy and his abundantness, we wouldn't have to have many reactionary prayers. And I know stuff comes up that we have no idea that it's going to happen. Sicknesses, accidents, stuff that needs prayer in a reactionary type setting. But what if we can be proactive about our day coming up? Or an event or a decision, Josh, man, proactive in our decision, proactive in God's calling on God, wherever you call me, I'll go. Being proactive like that and following that example of Jesus, just spent all night in prayer to God. And I think a lot of times, and maybe I hope I'm the only one that will do this, and I'll be praying and then all of a sudden the thought comes in, well, what do you want, Dan? What do you want? And I have to quickly remember the verse in Matthew, and I don't remember, but the number or the chapter. It's when Jesus says, not my will, God, but yours.
Yeah.
And that's his prayer that night, as he's praying once again all night long.
No, how I get hung up on the words and the specifics sometimes, and it's interesting to me in that that he spent the whole night in prayer to God. That we take a few English words to make up what that one Greek word is, but this is the only place that I could find at least that Luke uses it, maybe that it's in the whole New Testament, that he actively spent the whole night in prayer, and like Dan asked me, and I've never done that, but it kind of triggered me to other instances of when Jesus went, in Matthew 14:23, he went up to a mountain by himself to pray. In the context of that, he had just fed the 5,000. And then just after that is when is the passage where he walks on the water out to the boat to the disciples during the storm. In Mark 1:35, it says he arose early in the morning to a desolate place alone to pray. He went out specifically, intentionally, in Luke 5:16, but he would withdraw to desolate places and pray. And I could go on, but I think the point of it is, and we've talked about this on here before, of, man, it's hard to withdraw from the busyness. Today's a busy day on the farm, and just to get away from your phone and away from the TV and even away from everyone else, to just spend time with the Father. And, we see again that Jesus, who lowered himself to a man, it was truly God, truly man, but emptied himself, and he walked in reliance and perfect unity with the Spirit. And we went through the temptations of when he was led by the Spirit here and there. And anyways, as we continue to go, it said on me a lot of that he withdrew. I would say in that time, just from a invention, technologically, blah, blah, blah standpoint, that it was probably a little easier, and I won't say Jesus, but for any person to withdraw out, to be alone and without distractions. It's one of those things that we have to be intentional about in Montgomery, Texas. Anyway, I'll just speak for me.
I love that. And I love what you just said about him, Jesus going to a desolate place. And there's probably way more desolate places back then than they are now, but sometimes we may just need to get in the closet, shut the door, and turn the lights off, and get on your knees and pray. Sometimes it is turning things off, putting them on the shit, whatever it is, getting away from it, and spending, and you said it, intentional time with the Father, intentional time just talking to him, listening to him. What is he telling us?
There's that, and I don't, I really like this movie. There's a lot of movies that are kind of cheesy and corny and paint different pictures, but I really like the movie that's called War Room, or The War Room, whichever way it is. And it's a Kendrick Brothers film, but this old lady, she withdraws to her prayer closet and then disciples another young woman to do the same, and teaches her in the ways of the Lord, and a lot of that. And when you just kind of watch that movie and see, and she's very intentional about that, and that's something that carries down here in one of our closets here at the time, that you can, again, making an intentional point.
Yes.
And I would say that I don't do this enough, but to shut the door. And Christ says this: go in and close the door, go in and be alone. Yeah. And then he acts it out like we're seeing here. So, yeah, can't say it enough.
There's another movie that has some awesome prayer stuff in it. The Forge. I would encourage anyone to watch that one as well.
Yeah.
Have you seen that one, Josh?
Yeah, same people make it. It's kind of actually it ties on to the back side of that war room deal. Yeah.
So it's a great example of men to their sons, but it's also a great example of a praying wife. And this lady knew who to call when it came down to matters of prayer. She called them, and find those people that can pray and that are, I'll say, good at it. I mean, I don't know how to describe. This lady knew, and she was very intentional and very led by the Spirit in her prayers, and just, it was incredible. Don't go it alone. You don't have to be the only one praying for you. You don't have to be the only one praying for your family, for your job, for your career, for your future, for whatever God's putting on your heart. You don't have to be the only one praying for that.
That's right.
I'll pray for you. I got a Reagan. She'll flat throw down in her prayer time. That's a list. She keeps a journal, and we've seen prayers answered one way or the other in her journal. Write them down, guys. I'm not the best at that. I'm not good at it at all, and I need to be better. Write them down so you can look back and date them. Hey, that was answered. I prayed for that, and it was answered. Never, ever, ever underestimate the power of prayer and the power of Jesus' example of getting away from it all and saying, Father, here am I. Here it is. I'm bringing it all to you. I'm laying it all at your feet.
No,
Don't try.
it's taking God serious at his word too, right? Like in James 1, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. He gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. Let him ask in faith with not doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. But let those who lack wisdom with pure motives, if you remember when we went through James, but he tells us these things not because that's take him at his word.
Let's keep moving, and we're going to go back in Luke 5. About the middle of that is when he started calling some of the guys, some of his disciples, and how they followed him. In verse 13 of 6, it says, when daylight came, and he chose 12 of them, whom he also named apostles, Simon, who he also named Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, Judas the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. Those are his guys. That was his circle, and I have a feeling there was a few in an inner circle of that circle as time went on, as relationships grew and built. But that was his guys that he called. Even one that would disown him, give him up for a few pieces of silver, a few coins. Just everyday men. Some of them the public didn't care for. Like Levi, that they called Matthew the tax collector, he was not favored in the public eye. He had some fishermen in there, some everyday guys that he called to go and be his closest ones that he had, the closest ones as he walked those 3 years in his ministry.
Yeah, that part was interesting that so he spent all night in prayer, and when day came, he called his disciples to him. I've always, I don't know why, but read that as like he called the 12 to him, but he called his disciples, he called many.
Yeah.
We'll read here in a minute that there was a large crowd, that there was lots of them, but he called and then chose these 12, which he had already, I talked about that, but of these 12, he named them as apostles. So there's something different. There's still the other remainder of the group of disciples, learners, followers, these that are walking with him, that are around him. But he pulls these 12 and names them as apostles. Apostolos is the Greek transliteration of that. It's the simplest thing. We think of apostle and what does that mean? But I was kind of, again, I get a little specific sometimes at looking at this. And in John 13:16 in the NASB, that same word is translated as one who is sent. It says, truly, truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, nor is the one who is sent greater than the one who's in him, or the messenger. So what are these? Which we've got the book and we've got it all. But at this point, what are these apostles that he's calling? What's their mission? What's their point? What's their purpose? Well, they're going to be the sent out ones with his message. They're going to be the ones that preach and proclaim the cross, that preach and proclaim the resurrection of the one that they walked and talked with. As we kind of, we went through Acts, and you get to the when we had to replace when they had to replace Judas, and eventually did it with Matthias, but the two that they called, but that they cast lots to see what the Lord's will was, were two the requirements that they were there, that they'd seen Jesus, they'd walked with him and seen the things that he did, and that he died and was resurrected. So these are the ones that will eventually, here we sit 2,000 years later from these 12 that went out. And we know that Matthias replaces Judas, and that Paul comes in as the Lord turns and saves and regenerates and shows himself to him and takes him to the third heaven. Anyway, these are men directly commissioned by the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yes.
I know there are instances today of people that say, I am an apostle, this and that. But as we get into it, these men, the only apostles of Jesus's church, were commissioned directly by him. They saw him. They walked and talked with him. They were eyewitnesses of the resurrected Christ. And that's important as you kind of navigate through today, that the choosing of these 12, the commissioning of these 12 is imperative, it's specific, and by Jesus directly alone.
Yeah, that's what set them apart. They were chosen to be sent out by Jesus. The disciples are just those that follow Christ. And we are to be disciples, making disciples as we follow Christ, right? That is our commission, to go and tell the world about Jesus. And so as disciples of Christ, we need to be making disciples. But these apostles, they were chosen by Jesus himself to go and do, and that's what set them apart. A messenger, and I can read some definitions, I guess. A messenger who is sent, chosen by Jesus to spread the gospel. Considered the foundation of the church, as it got in Acts, as Jesus had ascended to heaven. And as you got into Acts, and man, what a story that is for Peter. Kind of redemption there, as Peter got to maybe give the first actual sermon that was given in the first part of Acts. But yeah, that's what set them apart. They were chosen. How cool would that be, Josh?
Mm-hmm. Well, and you think
of me, I mean, that's. Go ahead.
Just a thought that jumped into my mind of how cool it would be, but and we've went through Matthew, and here we are going through Luke, so we're going to get to all of these things. But how many times were they confused, lost, right, doubtful? I was listening to a sermon on this the other day, and his main point was of these 12 men that Jesus chose, that that were in his closest circle, especially when you talk about Peter, James, and John, that were in his inwardmost circle, closest to him, and that the Spirit used to write the New Testament that we have in front of us. But like you said earlier, they were just common men with faults, and just, I don't know how many weeks ago it's been when we look back at Luke 5, of Peter, when he figured out who he was face to face with after the great magnitude of fish had come to him. And he says, "Go away from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man." We can see in that Peter was just as sinful as I am. We'll see later where Peter denies Jesus because of fear and shame. Um, and Peter's mentioned more than the rest, so we can kind of toil down on that more. But all of these guys, doubting Thomas, and then, but we see what Jesus did with them, what walking by the Spirit, as Galatians 5 says, what they ended up doing as we went through Acts. And again, we're sitting here 2,000 years later because what Jesus commissioned and told them they would do, and he said, "I will go away and send the Spirit to you," and they were faithful and did that. But we're sitting here from these 12 that are serving under Christ.
Yeah. Amen.
But 12 ordinary men, not the upper religious leaders, the most knowledgeable, the most intellectual, the blah, 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 blah. Fisherman, one of them was what this man called the other day a terrorist, with Simon the Zealot, like a tax collector. We've talked, go back and listen to about that episode. You just think of them, Dan. It's like, why? And you think of yourself, and it's like, why?
That's actually the title of a book about the 12 ordinary men.
Yeah.
And it's a good read. We ought to get into that somehow. I don't know. It's got a lot on each and every one of them, but I say read it. It's a great, easy read, great read. And man, that was God sent them out, and we're this. He's called us to do the exact same thing. Wherever you're sitting right now, or wherever you're headed, or what, God has called you to go and tell. God has called you to be a disciple, the follower of Jesus that makes other followers of Jesus. How are we doing that? Go and be that disciple that makes disciples. That is God's calling on your life. And if you're in a rut, go back to what we started with. Pray about what God wants you to do, where he wants you. He may have you right where he wants you. You're just not participating. Maybe he wants just a little bit more from where you're at. Maybe he wants you to come back to him. We see, Josh mentioned it. Hey, Peter denied him. Good grief. I don't know who that. How could you deny the guy you spent the last 3 years with when you could look at him face to face from across the courtyard? I don't know that guy. You're crazy. That's what he said. Never seen him. Who's that? As he made eye contact with Jesus, the one he followed, the one he loved, the one he adored, he denied him. So don't tell me that Jesus doesn't love you or Jesus doesn't want you back. I mean, these guys follow him. Doubting Thomas, we haven't got into him much, but he doubted. He doubted when he saw Jesus. That's not you. You're not. He couldn't believe that Jesus rose from the grave, amongst many other things.
Right.
I mean, that's how he got his nickname, Doubting Thomas. God has a place or a way to restore you, a reason to restore you, and a plan for your life. If you've wandered away, if you've denied him, if you've doubted him, if you've questioned him, God has not changed. He can make you whole again. He will fix whatever he'll heal you. Whatever it is. He restored Peter and gave Peter the platform for the first sermon there was, and 3,000 people came to faith that day. I'd have to look. It's right over in Acts.
Yep.
I believe that's the number. Hey, in those days, they counted just the men, so maybe there was more. Who knows? 3,000, that's a good number. That's a few. But then that 3,000 turned into millions. One restored relationship with Peter and Jesus turned into millions of followers of Christ. What if your restored relationship with Jesus turns into a household, a family that's now followers of Christ? What's God's calling on your life? Get out of the rut. And I'm not talking like it's easy to get out, but you're going to have to get away from everything and get yourself alone in a desolate place and go to God in prayer and say, God, you're the only way out of this deal. The only way. And it's easier said than done. It's easier hearing it than done, but that's what it takes. Don't do it alone. Call me, call Josh, call whoever. Got some prayer warriors. We've got guys we can call. They don't care who, they don't care what. We can just say, guys, we need some prayer. And I promise you that Holy Spirit will interpret that prayer to the Father. God knows. He knows our prayers. He knows our wants, our wishes. He knows we're in a rut. He doesn't want us there, though. 17 through 19, it says, after coming down with them, the boys, his guys, he stood on a level place with a large crowd of his disciples, followers of Christ, and a great number of people from all of Judea and Jerusalem and from the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon. They came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases, and those tormented by unclean spirits were made well. The whole crowd was trying to touch him because power was coming out from him and healing them all. Man, there's stories. If I can just touch him, I'll be healed. Hey, if you can just touch Jesus' cloak, you'll be healed. Maybe all it takes is you reaching out one time.
Well, a little technical difficulty, and we lost Dan, and got running up against the timeline. Him getting on the road, so kind of wrap up today, and those. I'm just going to reread 17 through 19 because I'm not sure where the recording messed up at, but it says Jesus came down with them and stood on a level place. There was a large crowd of his disciples and a great throng of people from all Judea and Jerusalem and the coastal region of Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. And those who were troubled with unclean spirits were being cured. And all the people were trying to touch him, for power was coming from him and healing them all. A lot that I know Dan wanted to say, and maybe we get things put back together next week and kind of backtrack and maybe start back in 17. But just for my take, 18 kind of stands out. If he had come to hear them, or who they had come to hear him, rather, and to be healed of their diseases. So obviously there's the physical melody that they each have. And but it's interesting that the scripture says that they'd come to hear him and to be healed. They didn't come only to be healed. And that was what stood out to me. We hear so much of coming to the Bible, like when you have a problem. I want to go to the Bible. I want to pray when I have a problem. Dan mentioned that earlier in the episode of reactive prayer, as we see Jesus going to pray intentionally for what's to come and to prepare. I wonder if these people and not to belittle the healing of their diseases, because that's major. That's a big point. But I wonder where the balance is if they'd come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. It doesn't seem like, at least reading it in English, that they would be there, please heal me, and gone. They were seeking who he was, and he was confirming that in the power that he had to heal. And you kind of pair 19 with it and all the people were trying to touch him, for power was coming from him and healing them all. So that almost reads as, like Dan said, if I can just touch, we know of the bleeding woman, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. So it's along with the power of the spiritual healing that he provides, the power of his words, the one who speaks with authority, the one who has the words of life, the way to life. That's what the disciples told him. It said, Master, who should we go to? You have the way to life. You are the way. And so, yes, these people are being healed of their diseases. They're being healed physically, but they're being healed spiritually. They're being made alive, as Ephesians 2 says. They'd come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. That part just stood out to me, of seeing both. Fortunately for us, 2,000 years later, because of these 12 that he chose, the power of the Spirit, he wrote it down, and we have these words in front of us, and however many different translations in the English, most of them good, some better than others, some not so good. But just kind of remember that as we go through, and again, they came to hear him and to be healed, both so important, and they were being healed. And those who were troubled with unclean spirits were being cured. I think we maybe try to walk past, no, not try, but just naturally walk past some of that in our culture today, of the unclean spirits in the spiritual realm and the battle that's going on between there, and the battle within ourselves and the demonic presence behind the sin that's in our life. Sometimes the temptations that come from the evil one. The Bible tells us that our sin is again from our own desires in the flesh, but the battle that Ephesians 6 talks about, the spiritual war, these were ones being troubled with unclean spirits, but being cured, being made well. Amazing time. Jesus, he chose the 12. He heals many people spiritually and physically. Many come to hear him, to listen to him, to learn from him, because he is the way to life, and he has the words that lead to life. So we pick back up next week. We'll back up and start back in 17, because I sure want to hear Dan's take and recap from there. And then as we turn on into verse 20, we'll probably end up spending some time here in these next few chapters, because there is so much there. But it's going to be exciting. It's really fun just to see Jesus' teaching as he walked the earth. And man, if it doesn't get you fired up, then check yourself, because we're getting to hear the Lord himself and his words teach us directly in his word for us to have here 2,000 years later. So love you guys. Thanks for tuning in to another week of the One Truth. We'll see y'all next week.